Hey friends, welcome back to Rip It Off. And I have with me my amazing friend who's super patient. We've had some technical difficulties today and she has hung with me. It is Kristen Miele. Miele. I tried that so many times and now it feels like it's not coming out correctly. With Sex Ed Reclaimed. So welcome, Kristen.
Thank you for having me, Michelle. You did that perfect. It's a tricky last name. And honestly, half of my podcasts I've been on start off with it just completely butchered, which is okay because it's not what's most important. But you did great.
Awesome. Awesome. People are like, it's just Kristen. We've got
Yeah,
Kristen
yep,
today
it's
with
Kristen.
Sex Ed Reclaimed.
Yep, sex ed teacher Kristen. That's good enough for me.
I love it. Well, I have to ask, and being in this world of sex and intimacy, I would gather that none of us, as a 3 or 5 year old, were like, "Gosh, I can't wait to grow up and talk about sex all the time." And I'm assuming that that was you as well.
Yes, this would have probably been one of the last jobs I would have put for myself. Funny enough, you know how most little girls in elementary school in particular, I can't speak for little boys, but definitely little girls are talking about what they want to be when they grow up, like already. Like I and it but it's very narrow. Like it's like teacher. I feel like so many of my friends wanted to be a teacher, and I knew from a young age. And it's funny because I haven't worded this in a while. So thinking back, just how God is, I knew I didn't want to be a teacher. My mom, my aunts, my grandma, they were all teachers, and I just knew they had something I didn't. In that regard, I did not want to lead any sort of classrooms. And so not only did I know I didn't want to be a teacher, but I hated public speaking by the time I got to high school. I hated it. I would get so nervous the night before speech class when I had to speak. Same within college. It is truly a work of the Lord that I am doing this job. And not only that I'm doing it, but that I love it. I cannot picture anything else for me. It is great. It is where my passion is. So it's all God.
Oh my goodness. I love that. And I'm cracking up because I love when we tell God what we don't want to do. We're like, hey, that's fine. But I'm not going to do that because I've done that so many times. But there is a point in my life where I told the Lord I was not doing two things and I did both of them at the exact same time. And I was like, Lord, you're so cute. That's so funny. So then I started saying things like, I will never be a millionaire. Like, that's just not going to happen. He's like, no, you're right. It's not. Like,
You're like,
we're gonna
oh,
draw the line right there.
right, right. I gotcha.
Yeah, it's totally fine. Well, I love it. I love that you have embraced it and you have recognized, it's kind of like Moses. He's like, nope, I don't have the words. I can't do. Find somebody else. And the Lord's like, actually, I'm going to equip you and I'm going to give you the skills that you need.
Yes, 100%. It is time and time again. I have almost tried or started to walk away from doing sex ed. And consistently over, I've been a sex ed teacher now for 15 years. Over that span, he has drawn me back to it, back to it, back to it. And I've never been like begrudgingly because once I started it, I did know that I liked it. But I'm just surprised at how often I end up going back to it because he really started this job for me. I mean, I had great, wonderful prayer asking him for a job, and this was what he began in me, like I said, 15 years ago, and he has continued with it. So here we are.
That's amazing. Okay, well, let's hop into it. How did you get started in this?
So I got started in 2010. I was entering graduate school and I was studying public health. And I, like I said, was praying for the Lord to provide me a job because I needed to pay for grad school. And most prayer requests that you have and you send, you send out to your groups and you pray to the Lord, it's like a while before, maybe years, before you hear or know or are certain about it. And this was within 24 hours. I got a living arrangement at my university. That was a totally miraculous thing. It was free living. Actually was paid because I was a sorority house mom. And then I actually got a job.
Wow.
They said, you're going to be teaching a class within the public health world. And I was like, great, that's fine. I'd love to do that. Wonderful. But I was assuming that I would teach introduction to public health for undergraduates, but I ended up teaching human sexuality. And that was the beginning of so much fear for me. Not only was I teaching it alone, but I was teaching a topic that I had never once talked about with anyone in my life. I mean, I had great friends who I'm still friends with to this day. I have a wonderful Christian family, but we never talked about that. We were a pretty innocent group. We didn't even talk about our own periods, our own bodies, not much about dating, really. I had gone through college in a sorority, mind you, and I still hadn't really talked about this topic in a way that was comfortable, certainly. And so when I got that job, I was sure the Lord messed up. like you mentioned Moses, somebody else. This was not for me. But not only was I sure, I thought it was a temptation from the devil because it must be this talking about sex is an evil thing. That's what I thought. And I didn't really
Right.
know I consciously thought that, but that's what I had subconsciously learned throughout my Christian childhood is that sex is an evil thing until you get married and then it's great. But it's evil until then. So I was terrified.
But even that, you don't ever fully get rid of that.
Yeah.
Like it's not evil, but isn't it kind of a little like it's okay, here are the parameters. Like that's my story is I created my own theology and it had nothing to do because nobody ever said, oh, these things. Like I just drew conclusions based upon the little information that I got. So you totally are messed up in the head and you're trying to now figure out where did I go wrong in all of this.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%. I was a pretty terrible teacher my first semester I ever taught because I was so nervous, I was uncomfortable. I didn't think I was from a moral standpoint supposed to be talking about the topic with college students. I didn't know that I was allowed to cover the things it was covering. I was really bad, and my students gave me bad reviews because we did do teacher reviews every semester. And then thankfully, I spent some time in prayer and self reflection and was like, God, why did you give me this job? Like, it must have been you, I guess, but why? It's bad, right? Like, what am I supposed to do? Was I supposed to say no? Was it a test of faith that I messed up? And it was just like the Lord was there and he was like, this is mine. Why did you ever think it was so bad? Like, it was so
Mm.
easy and simple and peaceful and chill. I'm gonna use the word chill. It was just a very chill vibe. like yes. Oh, of course. Duh. Like that makes total sense. Like, of course it was his and he gave it to me and he created it. Why did I think any different? And now, I mean, I know why I thought differently because I was never taught any different, which is part of why I'm doing what I'm doing now. But that second semester was a 180. I ended up winning a year later the teaching assistantship of the year. And this was a Big Ten university. And that was because I just had this total 180 in how I framed and talked and discussed and engaged with the topic of sex and sexuality.
I love that. I was going to ask if this was at a public university or a private
Yes,
university.
it was public Big Ten
Public.
school. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, which I can understand. You think, gosh, am I even as a Christian supposed to be talking about this with other believers, much less non-Christians? Like, how do I even do that? I love that. And I love that you listened to the Lord and you kept taking it to him. And he's so kind, isn't he? He
Mhm.
just, when we take things to him and then we stop and we wait and we're open to hearing what he has to say, he always gives us an answer.
Exactly. Exactly. It
Yeah.
was it was a turning
Oh,
point in my life that I will not forget. So I'm thankful.
I love that. Well, and I'm really thankful that you're there too. I'm going to tell you my sex ed story in just a little bit. But before we get there, I want to know in this position where you're at, what is a lie that you would love to rip off? Because that's what we do here. And as you're in this field, what is something that you see over and over again? You're like, we got to get rid of that one.
That sex ed and Christians are enemies.
Mm,
And I'm just going to
wow.
let that sink in because it's so rampant in the Christian community right now. And it's not for no reason. I get it, but they're
Mhm.
not enemies.
There is so much in that. Because what I've had to unpack in my own and I've had to go on this little thought process of my own over the last few years of when I realized that the Lord created parts on the female body that are only for pleasure.
Right.
And I went, okay, so if I know that my God does not make mistakes, nothing is random, nothing is just happenstance, like everything he does is purposeful, then based on just this one little piece of information that I now know, could I be misunderstanding what God has designed? Like pleasure's good. He wants us to understand pleasure. He wants us to enjoy our bodies. And I think that that so ties into what you said, like sex, it's not the enemy at all. They're not at odds together.
No. I just saw a reel on Instagram yesterday where a woman who's a Christian, was ripping apart sex ed. And to be fair, I did a response reel. To be fair, she was ripping this particular sex ed program apart for a reason, when you get into the nuances of it. But there was so much fear that I saw and so much disdain and hate. And she felt very justified in that. And I simply called out that our sex ed should not come from a place of fear. Our conversations about sex with our kids shouldn't come from a place of fear, but it often does from the Christian community as this fight or flight. Like, well, maybe I'll get into part of it with my kids because I don't want them to end up like them, or I'll tell them what's going on out in the world and how bad it is because it's not going to happen in here. But you actually miss in that real, healthy, holy, continual conversations with your kids because you're so busy fighting what's out in the world. And that's my perspective. That's my opinion. And at the same time, it's rampant in Christian community.
Yeah. Do you think part of it is this thought that if we talk about sex, then they're going to start doing it?
Yes. And I think part of it, a bigger part of it, is that they've never seen healthy and holy sex ed done well, especially from, Christian perspective. So they truly just think it's bad, just like I did. And even if they're in their 40s, their 50s, their 60s, their 20s, they doesn't matter. They still are locked into this almost immature, childish idea of sex ed because they've never seen it done well. And so therefore they would say all sex ed is basically bad. And that's just not the case. There is really good sex ed that Christians can actively take part in with their kids, but they don't know how to do it. And I get that. And that's, again, why I created the curriculum I created. It's a serious problem that the Christian community has, but you can't just throw out the baby with the bathwater just because you think something in regards to sex and sexuality is bad, because there's a lot of sin in those areas, obviously, of life, including in our own hearts. You don't just throw out the entire thing, right? You have to look at, well, what is true and good about this and what is right and holy and beautiful. What can I reclaim, which is why I named it Sex Ed Reclaimed, and what is sinful and immoral and of the world and of dark things like Satan, and how do I separate those two and then communicate that to my kids. And yeah, it's a big job, but it's a worthy call.
Absolutely. Oh, and I'm so glad you're doing this. Would in my experience, it seems when I was in elementary school, I think it was probably 5th grade, we had our sex ed video, which was consisted of a girl doing ballet and then she got her period and I was a ballet dancer and I was like, "Oh, well, I don't want to do ballet anymore because clearly that's what happens." And I'm sure that there was some sort of like egg and sperm something, but it was like that was about it. And then fast forward years later, when I have my own kids, and again, 5th grade, my kids now are in public school at the time, and we go, my girlfriend and I go to preview the video, and we were like, school children. We were so immature. You're just like, hee, whatever. But it was the same thing. It wasn't I don't know. Is that sex ed? Is like, this is what happens to the female body. You get your period. And then, like, that was it. That was the extent of it. It was some, like, animation of an egg and a sperm, but that's about it. And we check the box and
Mhm.
move on.
Right. Yeah, that's not sex ed at all. If anything, it's a mandatory or state policy that your kids by 11 or 12 will get some sort of education on the menstrual cycle and pregnancy, like the basics. And that differs, honestly, not even just state to state, but that can differ between school districts based on parents and boards and, you know, if they have to take health at all and these kinds of things. So, sex ed in at least the United States is very much um, not compulsory. It's varied between groups and it's not reliable at all. And unfortunately, as in a lot of public health programming, particularly of the 90s and early 2000s, there was so much fear-based education. You can think of like a drunk driving accident, right? You see the car and it's all messed up and they say, "See, look at this, like you don't drink and drive." And that's just doesn't get at the heart of drinking. It doesn't get at the why people are so drawn to alcohol and addiction and genetics and behaviors. It just shows you this terrible car. And that might work for 1 out of 500 kids who are like so terrified they won't, right? Like you quit ballet. So you kind of miss the point, but it does freak you out. However, most people, it does not work at all because it doesn't get at the heart of the issues. And this is what people have historically, especially Christians, been afraid to get to is the heart, the desire, the curiosities, the interest. Because man, if you talk about that, then you got to really get into like how we all are interested in sex and we're all curious about it and we do want to learn about it. You can't just say, hey, if you have sex, you can get pregnant and die, or you're like this rose and it's all mushed up and touched and gross now and a chewed piece of gum. Those are all fear based and they're not good teaching. They're also not done
Yeah.
with excellence, and as Christians we are called to do an excellent job. And so I really don't prefer, to put it lightly, any of that kind of sex ed. Now, to be fair, it's a start in some places, right? The puberty conversation or the egg and sperm, but it's just so so weak, you know?
It is. It is. And it's scary. So as a parent, you're like, okay, well, I want to go to the next step, but I don't know how to do that. And, so you're kind of like on eggshells, like, how do I go to the next step? How do I, what is appropriate? What isn't appropriate? So that's where you come in. How do you help parents do this?
Well, how I help parents do sex ed is I provide it all for them. I have been doing sex ed, like I said earlier, for 15 years. And so I've been in classrooms. I've seen the general maturity levels of students. I've seen what they're curious about, what their questions relate to, how much they want to know, what's appropriate for them. And so I've created an entire sex ed curriculum where I am teaching students, and you simply just push and play the video content as the adults. But I do think it's hard for people to know what's age appropriate. And how this actually plays out is, for example, a 14-year-old ask about abortion and you might have a full-on conversation about it, right? But your 4-year-old asks what abortion is and you lie or you say, no, we're not going to talk about that or whatever. Instead of answering them on some level, right, in some
Mhm.
capacity, you just assume, well, that's too dark and too heavy and too intense for a 4-year-old to know. But the 4-year-old doesn't care if it's dark, heavy, and intense because they have no shame about it. They have no interest in it. They don't
Right.
know about politics or somebody who's had an abortion or, the heaviness of it. They're 4. They're simply asking you what a term means. And so I'm a big advocate of telling kids the truth, but keeping it at a level that they can engage with and that they can understand. So again, a 14-year-old, sure, you would have a full conversation, talk about worldviews, biblical perspectives, etc. A 4-year-old, you might say, an abortion is something that a woman can do to end her pregnancy. So it stops her pregnancy. You might use language like it kills the baby, right? Or you might not, because
Mhm.
ending a pregnancy isn't as intense, so to speak, as that. But you're answering them. And for too long and in present day, and it will happen for years to come, I'm sure of it, Christians just don't want to engage on that topic. And non-Christians as well,
Mhm.
right? Because they see it as too much. It's too much. It's too heavy. It's too big. But that's not true. If a kid is asking you, that's your opportunity. Like I view sex ed as this massive opportunity for fellowship and for discipleship and for sanctification and for communication and for good parenting. But too many people still view sex ed as this obstacle and as only a challenge and as a scary thing that they will have to figure out one day. But that's not. You can change your framework. It takes work, but you can do it.
Yeah. I love that. I love that so much because if your parenting thought process when it comes to sex is one day when they're a teenager, we're going to have the full on talk and we're going to talk about intercourse and sperm and egg and the whole thing, but you're not having little conversations leading up to it. That conversation is going to be very bizarre. It's going to be very awkward. It's going to be
Mhm.
very hard. It can happen, I'm sure, but why not take the opportunity to have these leveled little conversations along the way? And a lot of those conversations have nothing to do with sex. Like, sure, the case kid talking about abortion, but it's also all of those other kind of nonsensical conversations that you have along the way that's building rapport with your child, where they're like, oh, my mom is trusted. Like I can go to her about these things. I can ask her these questions. And what I found, and I'm sure you have, is most of the time, even if your 4-year-old asks you what abortion is, you give them an answer. You know, it's a mommy who decides to end the life of her baby or whatever your answer is. And they're like, okay,
Yeah, right, exactly. I have that exact,
back out they
nearly
go.
exact video on my Instagram, on my social media, my sex ed reclaimed account. My daughter was 3 and she asked where she came from. And I said, "What do you mean?" Because she was looking at a picture of her daddy holding her. And she said, "Well, how did I get out from your uterus?" Because she knows what a uterus is. And I said, "Through the vagina." And she was like, "Oh, is that ouchies?" And I said, "Yeah, it was." And she said, "Okay." And that was it. She doesn't
Yeah.
care. Meanwhile, I have had experiences telling 12, 13-year-olds, and it's for the first time in their life, you can tell that they did not know babies come out of the vagina. And they are like near tears because it's so weird for them. It's so scary. It feels more real because they know they have a vagina and it might happen to them one day. And oh no, it's just this bad thing. And it's just a completely different story. I have had countless experiences really with teens who I can tell talk to their parents, right? And teens who don't. And I've mostly taught actually in secular settings. And so those teens who have never had conversations are terrified. They do think it's awkward. They are
Mhm.
uncomfortable. The ones who have had conversations, there's like a smidgen of that, but mostly they just know. They get it. They're like that 4-year-old who walks away and is like, "Okay." They're just like, "Yeah, I already knew this." Like big whoop. That's how babies are made. I don't it doesn't matter right now, you know? And so it's
Yeah.
actually way easier if your kids are small to start when they're small because there is just less baggage and shame and burden on their lives and there's less discomfort and they trust you a little bit more implicitly, explicitly, just to know everything.
Yeah. Well, and the great thing too about starting young is the language is young. Language is small. The language, so it's like a shorter barrier to entry, you know,
Right.
like you get to be uncomfortable for like a millisecond because that conversation's over. And then it builds and builds and builds and builds. And I will say, have multiple children because by the time you get to the last one, let me just tell you, the conversations I have with my third one versus my older ones, they're like, okay, okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I don't have any patience to like flowery it, made it whatever. It's like this is it. This is A B boom done.
Yep.
You know.
Yep. Yeah, well they have older siblings by that point too. And so they're gonna know more. Potentially you got kids who maybe will talk more, will say more things, or they have older friends that come over, sibling like they need to know, or they will know a little bit more potentially because of the influence of those older kids around them.
Yeah. Are you seeing that parents, especially Christian parents who have grown up in 80s, 90s purity culture, are having a real hard time having these conversations with their kids? And I would imagine your curriculum is super helpful with that.
Yes, there in my mind, there's basically two groups of, well, I guess I'll say three groups of parents. There's the parents who never had purity culture quite yet, but they still got a lot of silence. And then there's the parents who had purity culture and are still pretty bitter and pissed about it. Like they know it wasn't very good. And then there's the parents who had purity culture, um, kind of think it was okay. It wasn't as bad as people make it out to be. They did all right with it, and they're still living in that truth, so to speak. Um, the middle group of parents are the ones who are particularly fired up to talk to their kids. But of course, there's parents in all of those groups that do want
Yeah.
to and that see the need, or the Holy Spirit moves, or they have a conversation, or they hear a sermon or a podcast like this, and they're like, oh, wow, shoot, I really do need to do this. This is important. I just was at a conference this last weekend, and I'm going to say it was a more conservative conference overall. A lot of Christian influence, but just more conservative overall. And unfortunately, I think the parents who were the most fired up when they saw my table, sex ed reclaimed. I'm the only table there exactly like that. Though the ones who come up to me, they're either in the medical profession, and so they know what's up. They've seen things, or they have had stuff happen in their family and they know it's important, but it's because the thing has already happened. The porn addiction, the abuse, the person in their family coming out, the trans person in their family or next door. Like the situation has already occurred and they're like, "Man, we need to talk about this. We need to have these conversations. I need somebody to help me do it. Like, let's go." But then there's this large group who's like, well, not my kid, or they won't know, they don't need to, or it won't matter. Or yeah, like you said earlier, oh, if I talk to them, it'll make them do it, right? Which isn't true, by the way. And so these parents, in my mind, I kind of categorize them in different places of like ability to jump into the conversations of readiness, really. And it's often the parents who grew up in purity culture but know it wasn't great that are like the most ready to go, and most excited to really get started.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, that's how I feel very much so. I mean, I grew up in the 80s and it just wasn't talked about. I just heard numb and dumb. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is so me. Like you didn't hear anything. So you're kind of like dumb to everything that was being said, or dumb and numb or whatever it was. And like you're just not informed about it. And then there's also this like numbness of you where you're just like, I don't know, like I don't feel any of this, but I want it different for my kids. And now you're awake and you're like, okay, no, when you know better, you can do better. So how do we do this? So what is it that, there's a mom that's listening or a dad that's listening right now, and they're like, okay, this is all great. What do I do? I don't even know where to start with this.
Right. A really practical first step is to utilize daily opportunities. So, whether it's a billboard or a song on the radio, whether it's a commercial or a streaming platform you're watching, in social media you're looking at together, a family conversation, a political thing, use what you can because there's so much out there related to sex, sexuality, gender, puberty, the body, healthy dating, healthy marriages. Like, there's so much. And so, simply ask your kid what they think. What do you think about that? Or have you ever
Mm.
seen something like that before? Um, do any of your friends talk about this? Do any of your friends identify like that? What have you noticed about this before? And you might initially not get much, or you might, but what it does is it really opens up the door wide to say, hey, I want to talk about this. I see what's going on. I'm ready to have conversations. Let's get into it. If they don't share, maybe you share your own experience. Oh my gosh, I remember when I first dated, or whatever. And so using daily opportunities. I know families who will see something out there scary and they'll just turn off the TV, right? Or they'll shut it down. Yeah, just keep your kids
Yeah.
safe, like protect them away from that. And sometimes, of course, we have to shut the thing off or shut it down if it really is impeding on our child's safety. But you also have to talk about why you shut it off or why you don't want to engage with that material or whatever it is. Because if you don't, then all your kid learns is that that thing is bad or those people are bad or not worthy of my time. And that is not what you're trying to tell them, right? I hope not. So, therefore, you
Yeah.
need to actually engage on, hey, this is why I don't want to watch that material anymore. This is why we really need to talk about it. Or I know when I was a kid, my sex ed was really pitiful. My conversations about the body and my changing, the changing body and relationships, etc. I didn't have any, grandma and grandpa didn't have those with me, and neither did my school really. And so I want to be different with you. Like address the elephant in the room. Um, if you don't have a daily
Mhm.
opportunity today or tomorrow, whenever you're listening to this, if you don't see one that week, then just bring it up. Bring it up and say, hey, this is for your safety. I care about you. I want to make sure that you're safe, and that you know what the red flags of this are, whatever it is. I mean, there's a million conversations you can have around this topic. And I know that that can be overwhelming, but all you have to do is to, what's that phrase? Like, how do you eat an elephant? Like one bite at a time. I said
One
the
by the
elephant in the room,
Yep.
so I might as well keep it up. Like you take,
Yep.
that step by step and you start going for it. So, um, recognize the elephant in the room, get your spouse to join in with you. Um, it doesn't have to be this big sit down, awkward, like weekend away or this book you hand them. It really can just be regular conversation about what's going on in their world and our world.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I cringe at the weekend away thing. I never did that. That
Oh,
seemed
me
just,
neither.
I don't, yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah.
But what I love about what you said is using everyday opportunities and asking, what do you think about that? The beauty of that is you're not asking them about themselves. There is this like pressure off. You're looking at a third party or something that's not them. And they get to say, oh, that's interesting, or that's, it's not, as opposed to saying, oh, okay, what do you, have you done that before? Or how do you, it's like, what do you think about that
Right.
over there? And
Right.
you can have like a conversation, especially if they're older.
Yeah.
But it's not so pointed as to, oh yeah, remember when you did that or when you said this, or
Yeah.
it just kind of takes the pressure off.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, or you can always use the friends, right? Or the neighbors or the cousins or somebody like have you ever known somebody who had that happen to them, or have you ever seen that in a TV show? I especially when I talk about healthy relationships, I always have kids think about people they know and what they don't want in their relationship, even if it's not a bad thing. Like maybe they think about a friend who's dating or an adult. Maybe they have like an aunt or uncle who started dating and they know that those people text each other like a million times a day. And they're like, oh, I would never want that. That'd be so annoying. Or, whatever, insert any other example. But the children think about this and then they think about, well, what do I want? What boundaries would I have in a relationship? How would I develop those? Why are they important to me? And that's a big thing in my curriculum is all of my content stops, it pauses, it asks kids to think about their own life, to plan ahead, to consider what they want in the future, their goals. How are they going to get there? Okay, they don't want to date somebody who's going to abuse them. Nobody does, though. So, what happens
Right.
when you hear of somebody who is abusive in a relationship? How do you help that friend? What do you do?
Mm.
Like, where do you go? What is abuse? What does it even look like? Right. And so, I really give kids like the step by step information that they need and would benefit from, but I also ask them to give their opinions on it too, because that's a great part of good sex ed is having a real conversation, right? It's not just a talk.
Yeah.
The talk is a stupid idea, frankly. It's a conversation.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the talk is one-sided. You
Yeah,
want to create, plus also you want them to learn
pressure.
vocabulary. You want them to understand how to actually communicate these things and to share them. And what better way than with a parent where there's that safety of you can fumble over your words. It's okay. It doesn't need to be perfect. Like, we're going to work through this together. We're going to try this together,
Right.
talking through these things.
Yep. And then it gives you more opportunities if you feel like it didn't go well or you didn't get to say everything you wanted. Great. You have a lot more opportunities as you continue to raise your kids.
Yeah, I love that. I love when the Lord gives me opportunities to apologize because it teaches so many things because I've done so many things wrong and I can go and be like, "Hey, you know what? I really messed that conversation up. Like I really had it going so a better way and I just took it the wrong way. Like, can we start over and can you forgive me, please? Like let's try again."
That's awesome, Michelle. I love that.
It's I mean, I could probably apologize on the daily over here. We're always something. But you know, all the things.
Sure.
Okay, friend, I think we could talk all day long about this because I am like you so passionate about it and just encouraging parents. And I think one of the things that I want moms and dads to know is that they're not doing this alone. Like there are resources. Not only
Yep.
is there the Bible, but there are tangible resources of
Hmm.
how to implement that.
Hmm.
And what is one thing that if you could just whisper to the heart of these mamas and daddies, that they're terrified to talk to their kids about sex, what would it be?
It's hard to think of one thing. I would initially what comes to mind is you can do this, but also what comes to mind and something I do want to mention is that Satan is going to do it if you don't. And I don't mean that to be like this scary thing to leave them with, but it's just true. And I'm a big advocate of the truth. Like if you
Yep.
don't do this conversation with your kids now in the near future, then someone else will. And it's
Yeah.
usually going to be influenced by some really dark stuff, right? It's influenced by the world and their ideas, or you're following Jesus and he has an enemy and you know who it is, and he loves to take over this topic and give your kids identity through him and all of his evil ways, right? And so we don't want that for our kids because we love our kids and we want them to be armed and to fight the enemy and to feel hope and joy as they look at their savior. But even in this topic, they need the weapons to do that. They need the armor. They need you to build them up and to battle with them initially while they're still in your house, right? You're only going to arm them up for a greater, healthier future. I mean, how many kids enter marriages that they don't know? One day enter marriages that they don't know what they're doing, right? Or what's going
Yeah.
on. And why? It's because, well, they never had that before. And so if you don't do it, first of all, you can't do this. I'm sure of it. But second of all, you don't do it, somebody will. It's not going to be who you want. So, yeah,
I love that. I love that because the world is talking about sex all day, every day. Any channel you put on, they're talking about it. They are influencing our children. They're influencing us. So are we taking it back to God's word and what is true, what we know to be true and right, and the creator of it? Or, I always like to make a parallel. Like, do you want your daughter's 16-year-old friend teaching her how to drive? No, you don't. You're not going to trust them to really, sure, maybe they can teach her how to turn and put the blinker on and a few little things, but do you really want to put that responsibility in a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, 18? No, you do not. We get that. Well, why do we want to trust these kids to teach our children about sex?
that's that's good. I
I
like that.
don't.
I like that. I used the metaphor the other day, or I guess I don't know if it's a metaphor or like an image, picture, whatever. Point being, somebody can tell me what it is. If your child is like falling out of a tree, you naturally are going to run and grab them, right? You're going to help them. Dad, help, help, mom, come get me. Well, your kid is like in regards to this topic, they are, and they are asking for help. They don't know where to turn. They don't know where to look. They know what's screaming at them though, and that is the culture, that is media. And so they can go to those places for answers. They won't be good answers, but they can go to them.
Yeah.
But they're like really asking for help. They want help. They need to get out of that tree. And if you don't, you would do it otherwise. Like you would do it if it was a real tree. So why wouldn't you do it in this instance? Why wouldn't you do it as they're asking for help here? It's really important.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my goodness, Kristen, so good. Can you please tell everyone where to find you?
Yes, I am at Sex Ed Reclaimed. So Sex Ed Reclaimed. That's all my social media. I have TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. And then primarily I am accessible through those or sexedreclaimed.com, where you can find my entire curriculum. I have 4 curriculum for kids ages 3 to 18. So it's based on what age group they're in. And once you pick the age group of your children, then you can get all of my content. I have almost 130 lessons for kids in total. So it's a lot, but that way you
Wow.
just have access to everything when you purchase and you can see how do I talk to not only how do I do this, but I can just watch with my kid and we can learn together even. And that's lifetime access. There's no membership fees or anything like that. So it's just a one-time purchase. So on my website or on socials.
I love it. Thank you so much, Kristen. I will put all of your links in the show notes so everyone can find you. But this has been just so amazing, and I'm so glad that the Lord caused our paths to cross on social media.
Yes, thank you, Michelle. I appreciate you reaching out. Appreciate the conversation that you're having and the podcast that you're leading to because we need more voices in this talk.
We do. We do. Absolutely. Okay. You have a great day, my friend.
Okay, you too. Thanks.